Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. This might be one of the first times I've ever gotten reserved seating anywhere. Feel very privileged. So Ajahn Karunadhammo asked if I would give a few thoughts, reflections this evening. As most of you know, I just returned from America, California, Monastery in California, Abhayagiri, having been there for just over three and a half months for the winter retreat. I was here a couple of months prior to that, and off and on for the year previous at Amaravati, helping out Lumpur Pasano, spending November, December here, Bayagiri for the winter, and then just arrived back here a couple of weeks ago. It's lovely to be back. It's, as I often say, this is my home away from home, away from home. It feels very familiar, very comfortable being here. The land, the property, and the community all together, very special. I was thinking about what to talk about tonight and was reflecting on some of our chanting that we do. In the morning chanting is in the Salutation to the Triple Gem, a description of dukkha, suffering, unsatisfactoriness, as there's the standard description that it goes through of birth, aging, birth is dukkha, aging is dukkha, death is dukkha, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, despair, not getting what you want, getting what you don't want, as aspects of dukkha. And then it summarizes the definition, in a sense, of dukkha as the panchupadana khandha, the five, as it's translated in our version, I think it's the five focuses of the grasping mind. Or one could also translate it maybe a little more literally as the five aggregates affected by clinging. Panchupadana khandha. So khandha is the aggregates. Upadana is clinging, and pancha would be five. So the five aggregates affected by clinging is dukkha, in brief. And so I thought I'd tease that out just a little bit, because it brings up an important distinction of when we're considering and contemplating and experiencing the aggregates, that there's a distinction between the aggregates as they're affected by clinging and when they're not affected by clinging. And of course what we're looking to understand and experience is the aggregates as they're not affected by clinging, because most of the time they are. In our daily life, our daily routine, it's controlled by our defilements, our greed, hatred, delusion. So, to understand how it is that clinging emerges in relation to the five aggregates. The five aggregates, just I think most people are probably familiar, but just quick summary of, in case you're not. It's what we often refer to as who we are, our personality, or it's what we form. The five aggregates are what we form an identity around. The first aggregate being the body or form, rupa, and then the second, or the set of four aggregates after the body would be the aggregates of mind. So this is a description, a sense of the components of body and mind. And the set of four mind aggregates would be feeling, perception, mental formations or volitional formations, and consciousness. So those form the aggregates that we often refer to as mind. So body and mind, that's what the five aggregates are. And it's good to maybe examine a little bit, again, as I was saying, the differences of how these aggregates are really experienced quite differently in the presence or absence of upadana, clinging. So just to take up the first aggregate, the body, most of the time we experience the body with this sense of ownership. The sense of I or me or mine is at the crux of this clinging. This is what happens when we cling to form or the body or the mind. When we cling to it with grasping, it's oftentimes with this formation of the sense of self around that particular aggregate or that combination of aggregates. That is a primary perception that increases our level of attachment and clinging that causes so much suffering, that self-perception in relation to the aggregates. So clinging to this perception of this body as who I am, or something that I should have some sense of ultimate control or ownership over, is what leads us to suffering, dukkha. We see that all the time when we, most of the time we're doing pretty well if our bodies are relatively healthy. We have a sense that they can give us some pleasure, that we can expect more or less that it will be functioning most of the time relatively healthily, and that if some sickness does come along, that hopefully it'll be very short-lived, and we'll find some sort of cure for whatever it is that's ailing us and get back to normal. And we come to rely on the body for a sense of gratification. We use all the different sense bases as a way of experiencing pleasure. And we get it, for the most part, if we're relatively young or not too old and relatively healthy. And the body fulfills our needs, and it seems to do what it is that we want it to do. So we get this sense of ownership over it because it is compliant with our desires, our needs, our wishes, and we get kind of lulled into that sense of the body's here to serve me in a way. The Buddha has a very nice, it's actually Sariputta had a very nice simile that he was giving to one of the monks as the five khandhas, in particular, in my mind anyway, the body as being similar to a man who hires a servant to help him out, and the servant has this intention to do this person in. He has a secret grudge against him for some reason, and the man hires this servant, and the servant serves his needs, gets up and is awake before the master of the house, fulfills all of his duties, makes everything comfortable, predictable, gives him everything he needs, helps him get ready for retiring, and then goes to bed after the master retires, and is always there, quite dutifully. And then when the appropriate moment arises, and the master of the house is unaware of what's happening, the servant takes this opportunity and does his business of killing him, stabs him with a knife, in my mind. And Sariputta asks this other monk that he's talking to, like, was that servant a murderer before he took on the job? Was he a murderer while he was on the job, and was he a murderer after he committed the crime? And the other monk responds, yes, he was. And Sariputta, the implication is that this is what our trust in this body, our sense of relying on this body for our sense of well-being, our sense of identity, is all about, and that in that we place our trust in it, we place our faith in it, we place our belief in it, and in the end, it does us in. It gets sick, it gets old, it gets sick. Eventually, it passes away. It has betrayed us. It is, in a sense, a traitor to what we had always invested in it. So, we have that sense that this body is something that we should be able to control and map out its destination and in a way that's always in service to our needs. But in the end, we realize that it was never the case. We've been duped. So this is what the experience of having a body affected by clinging to this sense of ownership in some way, is all about. So the Buddha says, well, to avoid that kind of suffering, we have to realize that there is a body, but that we don't have any ultimate control over it. And we can find ways to lessen the identification with this body and realize that it is just what it is, functioning on its own accord for the most part, even though we can influence it and help it along and make it a little more comfortable and use it as a tool for our awakening, then that's a proper use and a proper way to regard the body. And there are certain ways that we can contemplate and perceive the body that help us to let go of that sense of attachment, that sense of ownership, that sense of clinging to the body, the rupa khandha affected by clinging. We don't have to experience that. Ajahn Sucitto is often referring to the body, the bodily intelligence, that the body has its own sense of intelligence. It really knows in and of itself how to function, how to move, how to do what it needs to do to get through the day, and that there doesn't have to be a sense of me as an agent in control of that for the body to be able to function along just fine. Think of how many times we just walk through our various activities without much conscious awareness of directing the body in any way. The body is able to get up and move and and do its tasks, oftentimes while our minds are completely somewhere else. So this is the body intelligence being able to function in very complex ways in actuality. And to kind of tune into that sense of how a body operates, how a body moves, how a body functions, without holding a strong sense of identity around that, bringing some mindfulness to the direct activities of the body, and just watching the various ways that the body goes through its various physiological activities as well. We can witness things like the automatic nature of the heartbeat or the breathing in particular, and the various ways that the body moves without our directing it, and just become consciously aware of that as it's happening. And over time, if you just look at the body and its activities in a very simple, slightly detached way, then you start to get this sense of, oh, this is just a body doing what a body's doing, including when it goes through illness. It's just the nature, it's just human nature to experience these different aspects of the bodily experience. So you can just consciously make that a practice, scanning through the body, watching the automatic aspects of it, the breathing, reflecting, do I have any control over this? Is there a sense of anyone here who's in charge of this breathing process, of this digestion process, of all of these various functions? And step back from that sense of identification with the body. There's a refrain in the Satipatthana Sutta that courses through the whole sutta, but I often contemplate it in terms of the body. Each of the sections of the body contemplation, whether it's the breathing or the 32 parts or the 4 elements, etc., ends with a refrain that includes a statement. It suggests to reflect upon that particular body contemplation, in that the body is exploring the body, being mindful of the body in its internal and external aspects, properties, in its nature to arise and to pass away, and finally, in relation to the experience, the perception of not self. And the phrasing is, he is mindful, the meditator, the bhikkhu in this case, the meditator is mindful that, quote, there is a body, just to the extent needed for simple mindfulness and knowing. So there is a body, that contemplation. Just there is a body. It sounds kind of simplistic in a way. Well, yeah, there is a body, but it's very profound in that it really points to that simple experience of just knowing the bodily activities, knowing the body just as it is without imputing any sense of ownership or control over it, just watching it go through its normal activities. And I find that's a great contemplation, just walking through the forest, maybe from your kuti to the house or from your room to the house, back and forth across the cloister, just taking a moment to pause and notice this is just a body walking, body sitting. There is a body. And not having to pick up any sort of sense of ownership, identification with it. And if we do that over time and start to experience the simplicity of that contemplation, of that perception of it's just a body. There is a body. It's moving. It's walking. Then there's this incredible sense of lightness and a sense of stepping back from this identification And all of a sudden, there's the experience of the body, and then there's the knowing of that, just the consciousness, conscious experience of that activity happening. And there's an opportunity there for that involvement of me, mine, myself, in relation to the body to just drop for a minute, drop for a moment. And a sense of openness and ease of being emerges with that experience. And then we pick it up again until we stop doing it altogether. So that's in my mind, that's kind of an example of the khandha, the rupa khandha, bodily aggregate, without clinging. So we can either experience it with clinging or without clinging. It's our choice. Similar to the other khandhas, the feeling khandha, Vedana, pleasure, the experience, the quality of experience being either pleasurable, painful, or neutral. And we can either pick that up with clinging, or we can experience it without clinging as well. And most of the time we're involved with seeking pleasant feeling and trying to avoid unpleasant feeling. And when we get a pleasant feeling, we grasp onto it, we hold it, we want to keep it, we want to repeat it, and we almost have a sense of ownership when we get something that we really like, and you can really see that kind of sense of ownership when we've got something and it seems to be threatened in some way. Like I was thinking about this kind of very mundane example of your bread breakfast, and there's 1 tablespoon of peanut butter left in the jar, and you've got your eye on it, and you turn away for a minute, and then somebody else has grabbed it, and it's like, that was mine. So whenever that sense of being denied something that you want for a pleasurable experience grabs your attention, and there's a protest. It says, this is mine. That's grasping a pleasant feeling with a sense of ownership. And the same is true for painful feeling, because whenever it is that we experience something very painful and we want to try and get rid of it, and we're pushing and resisting away from it, trying to eliminate it, that in itself is a way of grasping. It's kind of counterintuitive, but our aversion to it really brings us into association with that painful feeling, and causes a sense of grasping or holding. A great example of this that I reflect on over and again many times. Probably some of you have heard me refer to it, but it's worth repeating, I think, is a story that comes from one of Stephen Levine's teachings way back in 40, 50 years ago, where he recounts an example of a woman he was working with who was dying and was going through a lot of physical and mental pain in the process, and was very resistant to looking at the fact that it was getting pretty close to the end of her life, and was going through a lot of suffering, a lot of rebelling against that idea of having to let go of this life and leaving the various people in her life, as I remember the story. And it was an intense struggle, and she was just not able to own up to the reality of the situation, and was very, very wrapped up in her pain, and would presumably lament about the unfairness of it, the difficulty of it, and railing against, as Dylan Thomas would say, railing against the dying of the light. Didn't want to go gently into that good night. And the struggle, the pain, the suffering that she was experiencing. And I guess, as the story goes, that at one time, as things were cranking up and very intense, and were getting particularly difficult and painful, she started to have this almost what sounds like kind of some sort of transcendent experience, in that she was starting to have visualizations, experiences of all the other people in the world who were in similar situations to hers, that were experiencing similar levels of difficulty, despair, pain, grief. And one after another, these images kept on rising up in her mind, and she kept on seeing countless other beings who were experiencing the same level of pain and suffering that she was going through. And her realization, her insight, was that, this is not my pain. This is the pain. And it was that depersonalization, that realization that the identification with the pain and the suffering was what was really compounding the experience and making a bad experience even worse. It's like the Buddha's story of this, the simile of the second arrow, the first arrow being the inevitable pain that we experience just being a human being, whether it's physical or mental, but the second arrow being that resistance, that railing against what is the true situation. And that we don't have to experience that second arrow. That's the kind of dukkha that we don't have to experience. In a sense, in this case, it's that identification with and clinging to the feeling aggregate, the painful feeling, and resisting it. It doesn't mean we won't ever experience pain and difficulty, but we don't have to add that layer of suffering that's brought about by grasping, clinging in that way. So realizing that it's the pain, not my pain. There's the perception aggregate, sanya, in how perceptions are there to help organize our sense of the world, from raw data, raw sensory data, into something that's meaningful. But it's often ways that we form identities, in a sense, perceptions are, and impressions, and trying to stabilize our impressions of ourselves and of other people in particular. And if we experience these perceptions with grasping, then in an attempt to organize our understanding of other people in the world, then we can create a lot of unnecessary suffering through that fixed perception, that fixed perceiving process. We pigeonhole other people. We come to expect that people will act in certain ways. We get involved with confirmation bias, where we start to look for tendencies or personality traits or experiences with other people based on our past experience with them, and so we end up seeing what we want to see in terms of how we identify other people and categorize them and judge them. And we do the same with ourselves and our roles and the expectations that we think other people have for us. So we have perceptions about other people's perceptions of us, and it just keeps on going back and forth like this, and we live in this manufactured world. and grasp onto that and feel that this is our reality. This is the perception aggregate affected by clinging, by holding. But we don't have to do that either. We can realize that we need the perceptual process to organize ourselves, get through a day, but we don't have to assume that these are all 100% accurate. That, you know, we may be missing something when we're establishing our perception of somebody else and what their motives are, or you know, how they may be viewing us. Our perception of how they may be viewing us can sometimes be very so far off that it's ridiculous. And if we can see that, then we can stop constructing that reality and writing that script to just be a hapless player in, a hapless actor in that script. One of the vignettes that I remember hearing about, and I can't remember whether somebody I think attributed it to maybe an experience or that Ajahn Sucitto had, but it was one of the senior monks was relating this conversation they had with Lungpur Liam, the abbot of Wat Pah Pong, who's just renowned for his equanimity and his delightful, very low-key presence. And that they asked him once, they said, "Oh, Lumpur Liam, you're the abbot of a very well-known monastery in Thailand. You're well-known yourself. People know who you are, and you have a lot of responsibilities and a lot of duties. And you know, it must be quite an experience being an abbot of such a well-known monastery, and to be so well-known yourself. And what's it like? What's it like being the abbot of this very large and a well-known monastery?" And his response was something along the lines of, well, I wake up in the morning and I do my meditation practice in my kuti. And when it's time, I come out of my kuti and do the duties that I'm supposed to do, perform the activities that I need to perform, have my meal, and then when everything is done, I go back to my kuti and resume my practice. If somebody wants to call that being an abbot, then that's their business. And I just really appreciate his very matter-of-fact, unassuming way of not picking up any kind of sense of identification with a role or a particular perception that somebody else has. He just realizes that that's just another projection, and it's nothing that he particularly needs to identify with or will get any benefit from identifying with it. It's just a label. So I think that's one of the best examples I've ever heard of non-identification with the perception aggregate and not clinging to any fixed view of a role that we might have in the world. A great example of just doing what needs to be done and not holding on to it. Similarly with mental formations or volitional formations, how often, mostly, in our experience, we experience those as verbal formations, the thinking process, and how identification with those, clinging to those, causes a lot of suffering. And the Buddha's instructions about how to just experience those without any form of clinging. When clinging takes hold in the thinking process, we go into papancha, or proliferation, and start to weave a whole story around just an impression, and start to complicate things, and greed or aversion or confusion takes hold and starts to steer the ship, starts to weave an even more complicated story, and pretty soon we're involved in a whole mental world of our own creation. I think many of us are familiar with that process. And where there's this sense of me being created, this, in a sense, this objectification of the whole process into me and this experience, or me and this fantasy, or me and this manufactured memory, then we've really compounded that sense of ownership, clinging, holding, grasping into a whole mental realm, into a whole proliferative experience. And we don't have to do that. The thinking mind is part of a natural process. We don't try and eliminate it or obliterate it or repress it to a huge extent, but we step back from it, and we can see, as the title of a book goes, as thoughts without a thinker. There's various motivating factors that are contributing towards the thinking process, but if we don't get involved with them with a sense of ownership, a sense of grasping, then the train, the proliferation, doesn't have to grow into such a complicated mess that we become, as one teacher says, the hapless victims of the thinking process. And we can step back and just watch the flow of the mental processes, the thinking processes, and the title, or not the title, but Ajahn Chah's very famous quote about still flowing water being a description of the mind itself. He says, have you ever seen still water? Have you ever seen flowing water? Have you ever seen still flowing water? That's the nature of the mind. There's the mind that is moving, thinking, contemplating, generating thoughts, riffing off on ideas. And then there's the still mind, the mind that's underneath that can step back and know that quality of movement as it's happening, but not jumping on the train, not going for the ride, but watching from the platform, so to speak. So we can experience both the qualities of stillness and of flow in relation to the mind, and then it becomes that khandha, that sankhara khandha, not affected by clinging. And lastly, the same true for the aggregate of consciousness, the raw component, the raw mental activity of awareness, the quality of knowing, which is usually caught up in one of the sense bases of sights and sounds, etc., or the intellect itself, and reaching out through one of the sense bases onto a sense object, landing on it, the awareness landing on that sense object, getting involved with it, and identifying with it, and doing that over and over again through all the different sense spaces, one after another. The Buddha refers to that as a magician's trick, because it weaves this sense of continuity of a being as experienced through the sense spaces. This is consciousness as affected by clinging, going out to seek some sort of stability, identity, coherence through actively getting engaged through the various sense bases. Consciousness affected by clinging. There's also a few references, not very many, in the teachings of a form of consciousness not affected by clinging. Consciousness, Vijnanam is consciousness, anidasanam, without surface, not landing anywhere, not actually operating through, projecting out from the sense bases onto an object. The awareness is there, the experience of the various sense bases is there, but the mind doesn't go out, the knowing quality doesn't go out and land and proliferate on any one particular sense object. It knows and it experiences, but it doesn't reach out with grasping and clinging to establish its reality in that sense object. It's the kind of consciousness that when you listen to a talk of Ajahn Sumedho, listen to one of his recordings, that's often what he's referring to in his teaching, is that form of pure conscious awareness not affected by clinging. It doesn't go out and grasp and identify and hold on to any particular sense experience. Just the quality of knowing, just as it is. So if we can experience these aggregates without clinging, through this kind of very pristine sense of knowing, without grasping, without moving out towards something, without letting the greed, hatred, and delusion take control, but letting wisdom and reflection be in charge, then we can experience this quality of mind, this quality of knowing that doesn't grasp, doesn't hold, isn't affected by clinging. These are the 5 aggregates not affected by clinging. There's a word that I use as one of my Dhamma vocabulary words, just to help remind me of pulling my awareness into this kind of experience as a practice over and over again, reminding myself. And it's a word that I think is very descriptive it's a one-word description of how to kind of remind oneself to go through this dropping of this identification, this clinging to our experience. It's called permeability. I use that word a lot as I'm walking through life, and I find myself moving towards wanting to get attached to something, or identifying with something, or suffering with something, or anticipating something, a difficult situation that might be about to happen. To just use the word permeability. I've heard Ajahn Jeff use the word porosity, and that's how we can establish a sense of alert receptivity, but with trying to not hold, not grasp, not judge, not proliferate, and just to allow experience to move through us rather than us going out to experience to get involved with it or try and control it. And if we can just be permeable to experience and allow it to come into our consciousness, not to try and avoid unpleasant experience, but to allow it in, to give it space, to hold it, and to let it pass through us without grasping, then we can be there fully with it, we can know it, we can experience it, and if we need to respond, hopefully we can respond with clarity and wisdom rather than with resistance and aversion to these difficult situations. And then if if it's suitable, it has its own life, it passes away, and we don't grasp onto it. We don't try and control it in any way. We allow it to arise and pass on its own conditions, responding when we need to, and not responding when we don't need to. So this quality of permeability, of allowing ourselves to experience the way things are, but not to proliferate and get all wrapped up in a story or in an experience, to the extent that we cling, hold on to, identify, and then eventually suffer with that experience. So this is a key to how to liberate the mind from that clinging, that holding. And then, with that particular approach, if the opportunity arises for the mind to just be still and not go out to all the various objects that generally pull our attention out from our clear awareness, either through wanting or through aversion, through some sort of holding, some sort of craving and clinging. And we can experience what teachers will refer to as the unentangled knowing, just the quality of pure knowing, Ajahn Sumedho, the pure awareness, so that there is this unentangled knowing that doesn't go out, an inward staying unentangled knowing, as Upasaka Gi says, inward staying unentangled knowing, no outward going knowing. All of the outward going knowing is cast aside. So that's how we can experience the five khandhas without grasping, without clinging, just in their pure, simple form as they appear to us in daily life. So those are just a few thoughts on the five khandhas as affected by clinging, as not affected by clinging, and I'll leave it there for this evening's reflection.
Before we do the closing homage, to close the evening, we'll chant one reflection. We'll chant the verses of sharing and aspiration in English. That's in the dark brown chanting book, beginning on page 33. Now let us chant the verses of sharing and aspiration. Through the goodness that arises from my practice, may my spiritual teachers and guides of great virtue, my mother, my father, and my relatives, the sun and the moon, and all virtuous leaders of the world, may the highest gods and evil forces, celestial beings, guardian spirits of the earth, and the Lord of death, may those who are friendly, indifferent, or hostile, may all beings receive the blessings of my life. May they soon attain the threefold bliss and realize the deathless, through the goodness that arises from my practice, And through this act of sharing, may all cravings and attachments quickly cease, and all harmful states of mind, until I realize Nibbana in every kind of birth. May I have an upright mind, with mindfulness and wisdom, austerity and vigor. May the forces of delusion not take hold, nor weaken my resolve. The Buddha is my excellent refuge, unsurpasses the protection of the Dhamma. The solitary Buddha is my my supreme support. Through the supreme power of all these, may darkness and illusion be dispelled.